Good afternoon. This is the session, and I was asked to introduce this session, and it's called Stone Soup Session. Sounds kind of cool, kind of 70s. Okay, 80s. Okay, I'll get to the right generation here. Okay, based upon the old folk story that is told of a hungry traveler that comes to town and cooks a rock in a pot, and he sets it up downtown somewhere where you can have open fires. At least that's where they're permitted. He then convinces everyone to add a little bit of this and that into the pot, and at the end, you end up with a really nice pot of soup. And this brings the town people together, and then they build the first salad bar buffet restaurant, and that's the story of the stone. I suggest you get on the internet, read the story. It's a great story. It's the story from the Middle Ages, and it teaches the lessons and the benefits of human cooperations at times of limited resources, and that's really what we've been talking about. And, are these times of limited resources? Certainly, I think these are times where our resources are being limited. So it's really a time for us to come together and do some stone soup. Okay, and so in this session, we're going to have two discrete, separate sessions. And so the first one, we're going to introduce Eddie Choi, who joined the California State University at the Chancellor's Office in 1998, following 6 years with the transit industry, administrating public works contracts. What city? What city did you build? LA. You didn't fix the problem. Administrating major contracts for 8 years in aerospace and did a lot of great stuff. Eddie's awesome and a good friend, actually. As the Director of Academic Technology Services Contract Management at CSU Chancellor's Office. Sorry, apologies. He's responsible for the management of the CSU's Systemwide digital library content. It's an amazing program, a consortium that was created for the collaborative acquisition of academic eResources. When you go to the library, you get those electronic resources. Eddie had a lot to do in his group down at the Chancellor's Office with putting that together. And we'd like to welcome him. Eddie has a Bachelor's of Arts from UCLA, and then he also has a Master's from Long Beach, so he's a product of our system. Eddie, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, earlier, we were asked to raise a hand whether we're from business or academics. And I'm in the academic affairs department, but my background is in business. I've been in procurement for quite a long time, more on the contracting side versus the purchasing commodity side. We talk a lot about what we can do in the cooperative purchasing, getting everybody together. Let's say we put the system together. We get top buy-in from the chancellors and the president. And what do? We get this dropped in our lap. And I think Bill in the other session talked about, it's so hard to mandate. When I first started at the CSU, I walked into one of the campuses and I said, "Hi, I'm from the Chancellor's Office," and I said, "PeopleSoft." I almost got carted out of the campus because it is so hard to mandate down. And in SDLC, we don't mandate. We use more of a humanistic approach to make our contract successful. So we buy on behalf of all the campus libraries, and we're called a consortium basically because the industry uses that term, and there are many library consortiums. But we do more than that because a lot of consortiums are just buyers club. We get together and you try to group your spend to get better pricing, better discount. But we are a bunch of people that are together, and we recognize that when we work together, we can do more than what we can do separately, either as a campus or as a library. And so we put this together, put this consortium together. I didn't. I was before my time. And we found that it really works. And now we're going through, and we're not static, we're constantly changing and to meet the requirements of the time. We do a group purchases. That's, don't get me wrong, that's a big part of what we do. But we also speak on behalf of the CSU campuses. Many of our, you guys have called, your vendors and you get a tech support, you deal the phone trees, they get back to you whenever. And as a campus, sometimes you find that that's what you have to deal with. But when you're coming from the system office, where our spend is 23 times the campus, we get attention. And we don't allow a vendor to give us a tech support number. We always have a person. And whenever a campus calls us with a problem that they couldn't solve because they spent an hour on a phone tree, they call us, we call our rep, they get it done. And so because we're together as one, we're able to do that. And we facilitate the communications because the vendors have been dividing and conquering our campuses. We have one campus paying one price and another campus paying the same thing with another price, and it makes no sense. Now we talk, and we tell the vendors, you can quote this to Northridge, but San Marcos is going to know about it, and you're going to be in trouble. And so now we have more consistency. And we also advocate. We advocate to the chancellor's office. We constantly asking Mike and George over here for more money. But we also advocate on behalf of the campuses with the industry, the library industry. We speak with one voice because the library industry is changing. And we're managing their budget. The libraries, as you know, in the old days, the print book, the card catalog. What we manage, we only manage eResources, everything digital. Digital subscriptions of journals, books, video, audio, only digital. And that industry is changing fast. And it's actually a little bit behind the time with some of the other industries because we still have vendors that are asking me how many copies of a book we want to buy. Because in the old days, it's easy. You have a book, you have one person reading that book, or you can use interlibrary loan and ship that book somewhere else. Now I buy one copy of the book, and the question is how many simultaneous users can access that book. And so now that creates a whole new skill set that's required of our librarians. And all of our campuses have different needs, and they're all different, and they're all trying to catch up with this new skill set differently. One may have an expert on electronic cataloging, and another have something else. But nobody has everything that they need to keep up on this fast-moving industry. So by putting us together, the campuses together, and putting a department in the chancellor's office, I'm able to pull skill sets, experts from the different campuses to help us in dealing with this moving industry. And because it is moving, we're able to drive some of the changes to make it more user-friendly for our campuses. Because remember, these vendors don't only deal with higher education. They got books at corporations, the public libraries, and everybody's trying to make it so it's friendly to them. We talk with one voice, and we make it friendly for the higher education. And we have contracts on behalf of the CCs and the UCs. And this was really driven by the tight budget. So with that, the only way it can work is to have a sort of a governance structure. And this is really the only kind of objective slide I'm going to have, because you have to have a governance structure to kind of show your boundary. And if you look, it's just a generic governance structure. It's very easy to put together. It took me a few minutes. What's important is the humanistic part behind this governance structure. With this governance structure, we have a sponsoring committee. This is 23 campuses, the deans of all 23 campuses. They can make the final decision of almost 99% of our requests. Then the second level is where we are at. And I divided the SDLC and the committee into two boxes just as an example, but we are really as one level. And it is not represented by every campus. It is a subset of campuses, but we rotate people into this committee. And this committee is responsible for making those decisions that will impact all of the campuses. And in order for us to do that, we have to communicate with the campus staff. And we do. We can't communicate with all the campus staff, at all levels, and with all the deans. That's the only way we can get buy-in from everybody and for everybody to understand why we made a certain decision. And that includes the vendors. When we have vendors that ask why we're doing this, we tell them, and we tell them that, hey, we're working with, on behalf of the campuses, this is what the campus wants, you need to help us with this. And it all only works because we have a bunch of people that are committed. It's the commitment of this. The org chart is important in that it divides everybody's responsibility. You know, one of the hard part is a chancellor's office contracts will go out and to the campuses, and the campus procurement person says, I can beat that contract. But that's because you got two people kind of doing the same thing. The org chart allows us to separate those duties. And once you separate those duties, you have people to man those duties that are committed. And that's the one key ingredient in this whole thing is that we have librarians that are all committed, that understands that together we can create something bigger and better and cheaper than we can do separately. And for that also to happen is the librarians have to have a global view. You know, we get people together from campuses, and sometimes they just look at the parochial campus view. They try to influence the decision to the best of their campus. That doesn't work. We work with a committee that has to have this global view to understand that, you know, we have this campus may not benefit in this deal, but overall, after all the deals, everybody benefits and everybody mix out better. And if we don't get together, we'll just fall apart and we're back to the deals, individual deals that we're looking at one campus, and we all end up, if you aggregate all the buys and all the staff and all of the customer support from the campuses, it doesn't work. And all this works because of communication. So commitment, communications, all this I'm talking about, it's all humanistic. It's, you know, I don't talk about policy. I don't talk about legislation. The way really this thing works on the ground is all these ideas here. Communication is so important because we communicate down to the campuses, and they understand that while we made a decision that doesn't seem to benefit their campus, the next deal will most likely benefit their campus. So we have people that understand that, hey, you know, we will get there, we'll have our piece of the pie, and that for everybody to just look at the bigger picture, not just this deal, but overall, and that's what has happened. We have about $20 million spend, and some deals, some campuses get better deals than others. We actually have campuses that will come up and say, to make this deal work, I'm willing to take less of a discount so that the smaller campus can afford to buy it because they understand that overall we're able to do this. I had a deal where it was for the whole system was half the price of 10 campuses, but the requirement from the vendor was every one of your campuses have to sign up because they wanted to be able to put into their marketing brochure that says we have all the CSU campuses. So we had campuses that actually didn't really benefit a lot from this particular resource, just a little bit. So I just started to make deals. Yeah, hey, how much do you want to pay? And so that's where the neutral party comes in. I'm the neutral party. You know, sometimes you just can't make a decision in committee. And so I know that in those instances, I'm just putting down whatever it takes to make that deal. And now, because all of our campuses are on this deal, everybody ends up making have a much better package of journals is what we're buying. But the committees have to have courage, because when you're making a decision on behalf of the committee using a global view, sometimes you make a decision where your camp is not, your campus, it could be viewed that it's not in the best interest of your campus. So you have to have courage to be able to make that decision based on a global view and be able to communicate back to your campus people that, yeah, we'll catch up later. We'll, just don't look at just this one, that everything will come out balanced in the end. And that takes trust. Trust is very important because, when I was making this deal and I would ask the campus, how much are you willing to pay for this? And some campuses said, just a couple $100. And I can see a lot of people out there thinking if you're a campus, then you can kind of wait for all these deals and say, well, maybe I'll just wait and I get a good deal. And I actually never had that happen because we're a cohesive group. When I ask a campus, how much can you afford to do this or how much is it worth to your campus, they give me a real number. And they don't take advantage of that in the next deal because we have the commitment, we have the courage, we have this global view, and we have the trust. And that's how it all works. And without any of these, the whole thing will fall apart. And like I said, we'll end up paying much more. We'll end up getting worse service than we would, if we were together. So our results is, we got the $20 million spend. We save a bunch of money. We estimate about 2 FTEs per campus that can be saved. Because of the budget cut, the librarians are overworked anyway, and by saving those FTEs, people are not being laid off. People are allowed to do things that they're more, what they want to do. Librarians don't want to negotiate contracts and talk about licensing terms. They want to do library stuff. And this allows them to go back to what they do best. And one of the more important is that, we have a whole package of contracts now that, campuses that couldn't afford it now could afford it. And now that students have better access. Whereas a student in one campus may not have had the opportunity to look at those e-research, those journals or those books. Now they have that. And that's one of the big drivers now that we're doing is equal access among the students of all the campuses. And I mentioned vendors are way more responsive, and we're getting a much more CSU-friendly business models from our campuses. That's it on my presentation, and I'll take some questions.
Questions?
Eddie, do you also negotiate the 508 accessibility for the software for all of the campuses?
Yes, the accessibility is part of what we do. We have 2 packages. We have the what we call the electronic core collection, which is paid for the chancellor's office, and then we have the individual opt-in package for the campuses. But we take care of the accessibility requirements for all those. So if they're not accessible, they don't go further. And we also, you know how hard it is to get a vendor to update their accessibility templates and move forward. We have much more leverage in pushing those vendors.
I was going to ask, Eddie, is there an opportunity? I mean, it looks like you've really come a long ways in all of the bullet points that you mentioned, and trust is a big part of it because, there's not a one deal association; it's multiple deals, and so 2 questions really, A and B. First, you mentioned 25%, 30%. Are you tracking the savings deal by deal for the campuses so that you can show that, or is there a mechanism that you designed to do that?
We're tracking it. Different deals have different ways that we have to track it, because some is whether we're saving it from list price, or some we're saving it from what they would have given a campus, which is much harder to do. But we are tracking it. We're tracking also the usage, and whether when we have a new package that goes to a campus, where those students are actually using it, and how much increase downloads the students are using, so that we know that this is actually of a benefit to the student.
So you're tracking it and by different aspects, but some of the aspects of what you're tracking are more difficult to quantify than others.
It
okay.
is.
And then the second part of my question is, do you, in the library world, do you see an opportunity there to work with the UC or the community colleges?
We already are working with the UCs and community colleges. We have contracts on behalf of the UCs, and the UCs manage some contract on behalf of us. The community colleges, we have a number of contracts that community colleges are buying off of. Because of the budget cut, we saw a big drop in the participation with the community colleges, but we're trying to get that up, and I've met a number of people here that I can contact and try to do that.
Any other questions?
So I have to commend you. That's a great model. It's actually quite similar to what we're trying to do at the community colleges, but more on less so in just library materials or journals, but to a greater extent other commodities as well. In getting all these, so do you have all these colleges, so all CSU campuses participating in this consortia?
All the CSU campuses are participating in.
Did you encounter any difficulty convincing them to participate in such an endeavor?
That was before I came aboard. I assume it was kind of like building trust. It took a few years and showed some results before really got. Right now it's running very smoothly, and I took over the department when it was running very smoothly.
Thank you.
All right, great. Let's
Thank
give
you.
Eddie a hand. Thank you. Next, we're going to introduce Wendy Streitz, the Executive Director of Research Policy Analysis and Coordination in the University of California Systemwide Office of Research and Grant Studies. The unit is responsible for policy matters relating to system-wide technology transfer, research administration, with wide-ranging activities including policy development and implementation, guidance for campuses and external entities regarding the university's policies and practices, negotiations of system-wide research-related agreements, legislative analysis and training. Prior to joining the university, Wendy was Associate Director of Intellectual Property and Technology Transfer at Auburn University in Alabama, where she managed technologies for both physical and life sciences. Prior to that, she was an engineer, an electrical manager at Westinghouse. That's awesome. And Wendy has a BS in engineering from Harvey Mudd College and an MSEE from Johns Hopkins University. Excellent. And finally, I'd like to introduce Sue DeRosa, the Director of Sponsored Programs for the California State University, Office of the Chancellor. And we went light with the stone soup because one of the things both these groups said is, and Eddie's talked about the humanistic choice, or humanistic aspect, and then you said a part of your consortium was good humor, so we're going to keep it light. So back to Sue DeRosa. She's joined the system in 1984 when I was just a child, and joined the Chancellor's Office in 2007, and it hasn't been the same since. Where
Me or the Chancellor's Office?
The Chancellor's Office.
Okay, just checking.
Where she has been responsible for establishing a system for administrating grants and contracts in the Chancellor's Office and for providing system-wide support on research and sponsored programs and related issues. Prior to coming to the Chancellor's Office, she served in a variety of capacities, including the Director of Marketing and Accounting for the University Services Program at the Offices of the Chancellor, Director of Grants and Contracts at CSU Sacramento Foundation, and Associate Director for the CSU Long Beach Foundation. Sue has many years of leadership experience and ranging everywhere from information systems to technology and related initiatives. And they do have a good sense of humor, and they actually did some pretty amazing things in Sacramento. Go and tell your story.
Pretty
Let
amazing.
me toss my stone in.
Yeah, who brought the soup anyway? We're going to talk about a collaboration that started about 5 years ago, and we're still collaborating and will be forever.
Probably.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it's that. There we go.
Perfect. So our situation is a little unique, but the things that we've learned, lessons learned and whatnot, are not that unique to our situation. So AB 20 required the Department of General Services, DGS, on behalf of the state to negotiate a model agreement with UC and CSU for state agencies to use when contracting with us for research and other services. It can take months to negotiate one agreement between one agency and one campus. So the 6-month time frame was never realistic. As Sue said, at this point, we are well into our 5th year, and we've worked together so much.
That we finish each other's sentences. I almost missed that.
Throughout the negotiation, we found ourselves both teaching and learning. We taught DGS and the state agencies a lot about the unique nature of a public institution and conducting research at a public institution, as well as our needs and our processes. And we learned much of the same from the state agencies as well. We also learned a lot about each other's systems, and that helped us present sort of a united front in this negotiation. Throughout our discussion here, we're going to be talking about 2 key relationships. One is the relationship that we developed between, in the area of research administration between UC and Cal State. And the other one is the relationship between the universities and the state, the Department of General Services in particular. All of these relationships have been and will continue to be beneficial to all 3 parties well beyond AB 20 itself.
So when we started out on in this negotiation about 5 years ago, we met with DGS initially, and then we met right after that before our first negotiation, and we worked really closely together to develop a strategy of how we were going to do this. So every time between each negotiating meeting, we met once a month. We developed language together, rationale for language that we wanted to bring to the table to start off the negotiation process. So it did lead to a lot of lively discussion in many cases, but we always ended up with a mostly reasonable compromise by the end of the day, or days as the case was, or years. No, I'm not going there yet. So in our when we first started meeting, we realized we needed to document this. We didn't really we hadn't planned that, actually. We just started our first negotiation, and we said we should have a computer and a projector, and we should take notes. And what we ended up doing is craft language during each session. We started with what we proposed, and we discussed it with the state agency, with DGS and the state agency reps, and typed language, and the UC team took other notes. I was typing on the computer, and it worked pretty well. We had good documentation, and we had that to review before each negotiation. At times, there were issues that were either more important to the UC or more important to the CSU, and we got pretty good at, we sat across the table, and we got good at kind of reading each other's response and knowing when something was really important to them and we should back each other up. So we had each other's back, and our collaboration was really strong, I think, as a result. One of the things that helped us avoid, too, was the divide and conquer. I'm pretty sure if the state reps were able to see that we weren't together, we would have ended up negotiating 2 separate agreements.
Or we would have had the worst position of the 2.
Right. Oh, there's that. So the bill required us to negotiate a model agreement, but it didn't really require us to do anything beyond that. And we decided pretty early in the process that the 3 of us, DGS and the UC and CSU, we should have some sort of an MOU that would document what we're doing, what we're implementing, and a process for moving forward. So that's how, once this is implemented, we will be collaborating for years to come.
Probably till we retire.
Yeah.
So here are some key components of a winning collaboration. In our case, we did have a common goal. It was handed to us by our legislators in the form of AB 20, but it did represent something that we all wanted, a goal that we all had, all three of us. The universities brought knowledge and expertise to the conversation on the specific subject matter areas that were called out in the legislation, and DGS brought the agencies and their perspectives on the same issues to the negotiation. Sometimes kicking and screaming, but they came. We did all have this shared vision of a model agreement that would virtually eliminate negotiation going forward, saving all of us lots of time and resources. We in our research administration offices, we probably spend more time per agreement, more man hours per agreement with state agencies than with any other single kind of sponsor. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot to be gained here. We also communicated that vision to our campuses and worked closely with our campuses to get them on board. Sue with the Cal State campuses and me with the UC campuses to make sure that we were hearing them and what their needs were, and that they were hearing us about what the constraints were and the compromises that we were having to make. We definitely had a clear plan of attack going into this, but it didn't exactly work out the way we thought it would, so we learned you have to be really flexible in order to make this kind of thing work. In terms of being a worthy partner, there were a couple of key things here. One was transparency, and this was more about the university and DGS relationship than between the two institutions. Mm-hmm. And it goes to part of what Sue said with crafting language on a screen, so everybody's buying in and everybody sees what's going on. When we make changes, there are always red lines so they can see what's going on. Another part of being a good partner is standing by your decisions. Even if, in retrospect, we wish we hadn't gone there, we said we would, and we stood by it, and that helped to establish some trust in the relationship, too.
Yes, and we had a couple of those.
We did have
Maybe
a couple
more.
of those.
I don't know why I got the challenges slide. God. So there were challenges. Certainly there were challenges. There still are challenges, as a matter of fact. So one of the things we discovered early in the process was being present, being in the room, looking at each other when you're negotiating and trying to build this relationship and trust was really, really critical. So at times that was a challenge because geographically I was in Long Beach or in Oakland, the States and all the reps were in Sacramento, and they weren't going to travel to see us, so we did a lot of traveling. But it was important, and I think it worked out or is working out. There are a lot of stakeholders in this situation. The state DGS, Department of General Services, is representing all the state agencies in the state of California. That's a lot of stakeholders. We have 23 and 10 campuses. So that made things a little bit challenging, and I like to say that too many stakeholders spoil the stone soup. Okay, I had to get stone soup in there somehow. That's not really true, but it was challenging. I think some of the DGS got a lot of pushback when they consulted. The language in the bill said they had to consult with the state agencies, and they did. They got a lot of pushback on things. So we ended up having to revisit something we thought was decided last time, and we ended up in a very reasonable place. We probably negotiated confidentiality for about a year. Yeah. And we started with a clause this long, and then it's this big now. So there was a challenge. Changes in the negotiating team, that presented some challenges and caused some delays. DGS would bring different subject matter experts to the table, usually from Caltrans, to help address whatever topic we were negotiating. And then that caused us, they would bring up things we'd already talked about. So we have to spend time rehashing the discussions we've already had. So that was a bit of a challenge. Certainly there were compromises. We made some, they made some. At times, the UC and CSU needed to work together, sometimes in between negotiation meetings, to collectively figure out how we could compromise so that we wouldn't cause either system great harm. And we did a lot of that after the negotiation. And now I'm done being Debbie Downer. Now you can take it away.
I can be Ursula Upper. We should have mentioned somewhere along the way that we actually met with the state every month for 1 or 2 days for a period of about 2 years.
Yeah.
And we were talking in between several times.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was really intense.
It was our life.
Still is.
It still is. Oh, that's right. I forgot.
So I get to talk about the opportunities, and the primary opportunities had to do with the relationships that were formed. If and when, and I think it's when, not if, the model agreement is launched, we're preparing to conduct joint training of our research administrators so that both systems will be implementing this consistently, and that also makes the training as efficient as possible. We'll do North and South, probably webinars, a lot of that. We'll work together going forward. We do anticipate there will be issues. Once this is launched, we won't have thought of everything. Not everything's gonna, really.
Issues?
Yeah, I'm
Are you
sure.
sure?
I'm sure. There'll be things we haven't thought of, and agencies, I'm sure, will interpret parts of this agreement differently than we do. So we'll be working together to address those issues going forward. The relationship we formed with DGS has been a really critical one. It's helped us work through some sticky spots so far, and it's going to be critical in the success of this agreement going forward, again, to help address those emerging issues. We know that they'll come to the table and they'll talk with us without playing games.
Right.
And then, of course, the relationship between our two systems in the area of research administration has proved beneficial in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with AB 20, like addressing proposed state legislation, common issues in research administration.
Yeah. Lessons learned. So we've covered a lot of those throughout the presentation, but I thought I should highlight a few. And I really just wanted a reason to put a picture of this bison I took on my trip to Idaho. It just, oops, sorry. It just, I don't know, it just seemed like it fit in. Wendy didn't see it at first, but now she's behind it. So the first thing is don't get too close to a bison. I can't enforce this enough, how important being there in person, to be able to look into their eyes. We had a lot of conference calls after we thought we were done negotiating. And we'd always have another call after that call, and we'd talk about what we felt, how did it go, what we thought, were they in agreement with us? And we usually thought yes, and then later we found out not quite as much as we thought. So I think that being in person is really a critical thing in forming that relationship. So good cop, bad cop. I've used that a lot in my life. I used to coach synchronized swimming, and we had two coaches. I was the good coach, and she was the bad coach. I mean, not in that same way, but she was tough, and I was the friendly coach. So we discovered this by accident. I think it was our second or day of negotiating, and Wendy brought up something. It was a pretty tough subject, and I kind of tried to find offer a friendly little amendment to it, and then we discovered that we can do this. We can play good cop, bad cop. So I think in the end we ended up with a lot better place by kind of playing that role. And humor at the right moments. So we used that a lot. And there were times we started in a room that was a little bigger than this. Okay, it was not quite this small, but it was pretty small in tight quarters. And sometimes you could cut the tension with a butter knife. And then we would just throw out something funny, and then everyone laughed and relaxed, and we got back on topic, and it worked. It worked well. Leveraging our combined strengths. So it's so much better for us to do this as two systems together, because I think each individually, if we tried to do this, it would have never worked. So our united front has been really, really critical. Our common goal, certainly AB 20 is what brought us together, but we're going to continue not just with AB 20, but other things. We have one issue that is still unresolved, and that's indirect cost. We will work together on that and have a united front there. So if we can't get the state to agree on something, we'll just make it happen together. And so the last thing is never turn your back on a bison, but if you do, run faster than your colleague. Okay.
Like that trust thing.
Yeah, that's not very collaborative, but it's an example of humor. Oh, and above all, never give up. So we can't tell you how many, we were trying to think how many times. We said so many times in the last 5 years, one of us was wearing rose-colored glasses at any given time. Never all of us have, which
Never
is
more
interesting.
than one.
Yeah. And so we always, somebody would say something positive about the negotiation, and they're like, are you wearing the rose-colored glasses again? We think we've said that more than 1,000 times in this 5-year time period.
Possible.
And, as it turns out, I cannot see a thing through rose-colored glasses, and so I think I know why they're so good. Ooh, see?
Oh, I can see better now.
That's amazing.
So yeah, don't give up. And someday it might pay off. Even when 6 months turns into 5 years, we're still focused on the brass ring of this model agreement. And I do think there's a very good chance that we'll be able to seize it later this calendar year even. Don't you?
I've made that prediction several
Here,
calendar years in a row.
wait. No, I'm certain it'll happen this year.
Oh my God, you're right. I feel so much better now. And the last thing we have is just a couple of quotes on collaboration. And when I found this first one, it's so AB 20. I read this, I'm like, oh my God, they're right. I sat there and I typed all these provisions during the negotiation, and in the end, it's not my fault. Nobody's going to remember who did the typing.
Oh no, we know who did the typing.
Well, it won't be in the agreement. I'm not signing it. And the last thing, just coming together, staying together, and working together. We do see this as a success, even though we don't have a model agreement yet, but the brass ring is there. And you heard it here, George. She said within this calendar year.
I am truly saddened that your status report will not have AB 20 on it to me anymore. I have gotten so used to reading your AB 20 reports over the last 5 years. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to fill that void in our relationship.
I'll find something, I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure there'll be the AB 20 implementation
There's the AB 20
status.
implementation, and then the annual meeting that we'll have with DGS. It'll never end.
I do have a question though. Okay, so I'm trying to remember now because it's been so long. So this agreement with DGS relates to grant and contract activity. Mm-hmm. But it comes to mind to me that we at the CSU and maybe at the UC, and I'd like to hear from the UC and community college, we have other activities that we pay DGS for their services, and we're sort of forced into paying for those services because we get these invoices from them, and they say, we provided these services, and you're going to pay that. Is it similar?
I don't think the UC has that.
They don't have.
We're special because they're constitutionally separate.
We
So
are
they don't.
Okay,
We're
so you don't have
constitutionally
them
autonomous.
doing.
Yeah.
Okay. And the community colleges do not either have DGS. They do. Or they do.
Yeah.
Okay. The
Yeah.
state. Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, on a central
That makes
basis.
sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we're not going to solve that problem.
No.
Excellent. Are there questions?
I do.
We found AB20 riveting as well.
We have no.
Do you guys want to put these on? It might help.
No, go ahead. We do have a question right here.
So this is interesting. This is for grants, and we heard the one from Social Soup that was for library services. Now, is there anything for like a system-wide UC and CSU collaboration with like software purchases or
This is the direction that Tom Roberts and Bill Cooper and Joseph, they were all talking about earlier today. That's the direction they're headed.
Awesome.
These examples are examples of how a good collaboration is put together that actually builds something that's useful. And one of the things that's built that's useful, and it's one of the things at the very beginning I said something about we're going to build networks, because to be honest, there's a network here. And when things happen in contracts and grants, this network is already in place, and they actually solve a lot of issues and problems. They initially came together to solve one issue, maybe software contracts, but they've actually created a network to solve a lot of our common challenges. And I think that we as a system are more responsive. Secondly, if you sit down and you look at the example on these contracts, individually, we would have had a machine negotiating over here and machine negotiating over there. And just like Eddie spoke of earlier, at some point, when you bring forward this united voice, you're saying, us three systems, we're together on this. We have an opinion. This is the way we think it can be. We're reasonable. We're willing to have good humor, right? And we're going to try to understand your needs and concerns, because the state isn't the enemy. They're a part of the team, right? It's one of the opportunities is to get to work with them. So.
There's a question back there.
As an example, and software, you mentioned Sterling, is that we actually do share a software contract. It's a software reseller contract where we all buy, the CSU and the UC, we buy our software from the same reseller now as a result of a joint RFP that we just finished up here last December. So SHI is our software reseller of choice, and that's where we pump about $40 million through right now. So,
Very good.
it actually does work.
So I have a comment more than a question. I was struck by the fact that you're already planning to collaborate on your training after this becomes a reality, and you have a document from which you will develop a training module, because I was thinking how many other things there may be where we could collaborate on how we train our employees. It could be a wonderful model. There's so many things that we do or have to do in common, or we operate from the same construct, and we all have to make sure everybody understands the complicated verbiage that overarches what you do. That could be a great area to keep, kind of take your lead and continue that.
Right, and we agree. We were just talking about that earlier today, just that after this is done, because it has been a little bit of a time suck, that we would like to, after the training, bring our groups together, directors of research and sponsored programs administration, and talk about just that. What other areas could we collaborate and share knowledge? And that's a perfect example. Thank you. Arm wrestle for it.
I guess just a comment to follow up on that. I think the community colleges have identified training as one of the areas that it's actually been approached from a technology standpoint. How can technology enable better visibility and awareness as to what's going on from a training perspective across our 72 districts? So that's actually in the technology plan that the representative group of individuals within our system come together and review on an annual basis. That was one of the initiatives that kind of rose to the top. And in addition, there has been some investment into our system for professional development around the new dollars that have come in for our student success initiative. So that may be something that that we can all work together on here quickly.
So it sounds like the two of you are like-minded and had a very interest-based approach to collaboration. Two questions. One is, was if someone from the state were here sitting with you, would they have had the same sort of responses that, or would they have agreed with everything you've said?
That's a pretty good question.
I guess it depends on who from the state, right?
Yeah.
So I think DGS largely would, and that was
I
our most
agree.
important partner. I think
Yeah.
certain agency reps did not come into this in a collaborative spirit.
And so that leads me to this whole idea of collaboration is what we all work towards, but sometimes you have people who are sort of not on board or recalcitrant. And so I think some of the things you talked about were addressing those challenges, but are there other little insights or insights?
You know, I think we know that first getting across the finish line and actually implementing this is a first really big step. We know that once we implement it, there's going to be new challenges. We said all along during our negotiation, if there was a state agency rep that would say, oh, our people will never go for this, when it came to indirect costs, they don't want to pay that much indirect costs, well, neither do our faculty. So we'll have some issues once it's implemented on our own campuses to resolve. We will resolve those as long as it's just a campus, university-related issue. We'll resolve those ourselves. The state will come up with issues too, we fully expect, in implementing this. Some state agencies will say they don't want to. So we expect that will happen. I know Eddie said he wasn't in charge of this department when it was first set up, and someone asked if there were challenges in setting it up and building the trust. We've built the trust with DGS. It's gonna take some years to build trust with all of the state agencies. Some of them, I think, we're good, and some it'll just be a little bit harder.
On the specific question of when you have an individual, right, who's resisting being collaborative for whatever reason, I think there are a number of things that we did, and I can think of a couple people in particular, right? One of the most important was to let them have their say.
Yeah.
Hear what they have to say, hear their concerns, acknowledge their concerns, validate their concerns, and because they won't listen to you until they feel that they've been heard, and then you can start working towards a solution. But I think that was probably the single most important thing with these couple people I'm thinking of is really making sure that they knew that we understood what their concern was before we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just give a for instance of what kind of a contract this would be, what kind of services or whatever contract you would enter into with the state? Just an example.
It's pretty much any.
It would be, it's pretty much any, but it would be for, I think, per the legislation, a contract or a grant for us to conduct research for an agency, or for us to provide a service to, and that's writ large, so a service to an agency, or instruction, I think, was in there too.
Yeah. It covers pretty much everything. The legislation does have a caveat that if both parties think that this agreement doesn't fit their situation, they could agree that it doesn't. And one of the things we'll do in training, we're not opposed to that if there really are situations that don't fit. We just want to know about them. So in our training of our two systems, we'll set up some sort of a, information sharing type of a thing so that we can be aware.
Did the issue of intellectual property get resolved?
So that was
kind of, almost, maybe.
Mike mentioned that my background was intellectual property and tech transfer. That was such a tough issue. We think maybe that's the last thing that we're trying to get confirmation from DGS on right now, even.
So when you put it into operations, that could be something that may need to be tweaked.
Oh yeah.
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 Any other questions? All right, let's give them a hand. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.